screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Refurbished, trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempt the mental robbery, executed sloppily. The paupers see this mockery and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Ways, where today we're going to talk about retro causality, which is basically time travel and is actually real, even according to materialist science, but definitely according to the soul and the non-linear time-space continuum that we find ourselves within here. Our consciousness, in fact, is non-local, which means that it isn't right here and right now. Or rather, it's the only thing that's right here and right now. But your consciousness does not exist in your brain. It doesn't exist in this body. It exists everywhere all at once. And because of that, and because you are connected to your consciousness, the more you are aware of it, the more you understand it, the more you can apply time travel or retrocausality in your own life. So if you don't know me, I'm Lindsay Sharman of Rogue Ways, rogueways.org. All of my shows, all of my books that I write, all of the one-on-one work I do with people via past life reading, sound healing, spiritual guidance, and more, channeling your spiritual guides and allies and their messages for you, doing all of that work, that's all there on rogueways.org. And I'd love to work with you if you would like to work more together. There's also plenty of stuff there for you to connect with. And so that's the best place to go to check out everything I do. I'm a time traveler. I have time traveled so many times in so many different ways. It'd be hard to describe them all in one episode. I'm going to give you a few choice examples here. I'm also going to give you an example of how to do this for yourself. My genuine hope is that I am not needed as a spiritual guide or healer ever, and that you can just do this all yourself. That's what I would love, is for the whole world to be so deeply connected to their own heart and their own consciousness that they don't need anybody. And the truth is you don't. And the other truth is that it's very nice to have a guide and a friend and an ally in this space sometimes. And so we, teachers and healers and all of this are very, very good. And ideally you become that yourself and you do not need others for your own journey. So that's the goal. And yes, my other almost constantly, my goal is also to show the bridge between the scientific and the spiritual. I am a very logical minded person. I'm a very skeptical person. And yet I became a spiritual healer and teacher because of my soul's plan for myself in this life. And so I have a foundation of the materialist, the scientific. And so I understand these things from both viewpoints constantly. And I love to show over and over again how they're connected. So that's what we're going to do when we look at time traveling or retrocausality today, is we're going to look at the scientific, the materialist, and then also the spiritual. So let's just get right to that. And the first thing we'll talk about with this quite strange image that nonetheless shows you the idea is we're going to talk about the double slit experiment. You've probably heard this referred to many times, or you might be even very, very familiar with it. And to those of you who aren't familiar with it, basically what the double slit experiment showed was that light could be perceived as a photon, a singular packet of information that is identifiable, or as a wave, which is not a singular piece of packet. It is a continuous sort of state that may vary, right? Peaks and troughs, but it is one continuous thing. And that it could be perceived as either. And the thing that changes whether or not it is perceived as a photon or as a wave is the observer's intention and awareness. And this was the first sort of discovery and experiment that just sort of blew people's minds. And this is back in like the 60s or so. And they did this, and they shined the light through these double slits. And when the observer was looking to see a series of photons hitting this sort of, let's say, paper receiver through these two slits that the light was coming through, and they were looking to see like a scatter plot of all these points where all these photons hit, then that is what they would see. And when they were looking to see instead them hit that in a waveform that is not a photon packet, and it would look totally different, then they would see that. And this is crazy, right? This means that what you expect to see, what you choose to see, is what you're going to see. And that is proven in materialist science. This is a repeatable experiment. You could do it in any lab, anywhere in the world at any time. So this has now been proven, and not enough people really care about it. Whereas if you really cared about it, you would start to see, then I literally determine my reality. My consciousness is such that it creates my experience. And part of the reason why this doesn't hit so many people so hard is they aren't ready for that, right? That's a little too much power, perhaps. But what it really is, too, is it's a little bit too much responsibility. Because now we have to know what we want to see, and we have to know what we intend, and we have to be aware of it, and we have to be aware of it constantly. And this is what all the great teachers and all the great masters have told us for thousands of years, is that you have to be more and more aware. That self-awareness and being aware of the moment and the here and now is actually the ideal state. And ideally, you're in that every moment of every day. But if you were really in that every moment of every day, you wouldn't be a human anymore, and you'd be floating off as a light ball somewhere. And, we're not quite there yet. But it still helps for us to know that that is our ideal. It really helps for us to know that our consciousness is so powerful that it changes physical reality. And it's also really important to note that the photon was going to hit, or the wave was going to hit, and it knew that before it left the light source, even if you decided after it left the light source. So that's very important to understand, that this is true. The outcome of the experiment is true, even if the light has already been shown. And then you say, okay, I'm going to study it as a photon. That means that your decision went back in time in order to create what you are about to experience right now. And that should blow your mind. And it should blow every scientist's mind. And it should blow every person's mind, because that is time travel. That means retrocausality is a fact of our existence, and that what determines where in time something lies is your consciousness. This means that you can affect your future. We call that manifestation. But it also means that you can affect your past. And we don't accept that. Our brains can hardly even no, it already happened. How could I change it? But if you can change whether the light left as a photon or a wave, you can change what happened in your past. And it just is true. You have to understand it. You have to expect it. And then you can apply it. And this is actually the work I do a lot of the time. What I'm doing with people is we're healing something. And to be healing something implies that something negative happened in the past. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to heal today. So we actually go back to the past in order to do the healing. We don't do the healing right here and right now. And we'll talk about in a moment how that is actually a principle in psychology as well. In therapy, especially with the worst sorts of mental illness like PTSD, which I'm very familiar with because I have CPTSD. So I have the worse than normal PTSD. And I've been diagnosed with that and I've gone through treatment for that. And that's what we do in that treatment, is we actually go back in time. They don't call it that, right? They don't talk about it in that exact way, but that is actually what we're doing when we do that work. So science recognizes this. Psychology recognizes this. Mysticism and spirituality has always recognized this. It's just the mainstream of people that don't really acknowledge it. So we can know it's real. We can know that it's been proven in all those ways. We can understand that it happens, and we can start to apply this in our lives in ways that are very practical and effective. And we'll get to that too. So, to know that your consciousness is not here and right now, although it is, and ideally you're only here now, and it can travel backwards in time. It can travel forwards in time. It is non-local. And therefore, it can create retrocausality. What that word actually means is that the cause already occurred in the past, but it is happening right now. Right? Retrocausality, we're going back in time to create something that will produce results right here and right now. And that does not jive with our sense of time. It doesn't jive with our sense that it's linear. But at the spiritual level, and if you've ever had a out-of-body experience, or if you've ever had a psychic impression come to you about the future, a prophetic dream, you already know time isn't linear. You've already had experiences like this. You already understood that, like, really, actually, things are not A, then B, then C. Things are actually all directions, and possibly all directions are causing what you're experiencing right here and right now. So you already have this understanding at some level. Most people who are here listening to this type of content have already had some sort of glimmer of these things, if not a really profound experience and understanding that this is fact and that this is true and that real actual results can be achieved. So a lot of times people think, this is woo woo and this is out there and this is sort of like, putting the silver lining on the cloud, and it's not. It is very real. And so I keep emphasizing that this isn't just a fun exercise we do because it makes us feel better about who we are, where we came from, or where we're going, or, makes us feel like we have more control of our lives, or any of these sort of psychobabble things that some people attribute this to. That's not what we're doing here. We are actually understanding the true nature of our bodies and our consciousness, and we are learning how to use them in more and more empowered ways. So we're just becoming more aware of reality. And again, it's that consciousness is non-local. It is not in your brain. It is everywhere all the time. That is your consciousness. It's not contained by time. It's not contained by space. It's not contained by physicality. We say a lot when, a lot of different spiritual practitioners, we say there is no time or space in the spiritual dimension. It's not totally true because you can go backwards and forward in time and you can move around in space, but it is true in that you're not contained by it. So it's non-local. And it's not here. It is everywhere. Right? So it's non-local, and therefore it is all directions, all spaces, and therefore it is no time. It can go backwards and forwards in time. So it's non-local, and it can be that retrocausality occurs. It can also be that prophecy occurs, right? We can know the future. We can change the past. We can change the future because we changed the past, right? We can change right here, right now because of either we saw the future or we changed the past. So this is what we know. We don't just hope it. We don't just believe it. We can actually know it, and then we can actually practice it. One other experiment that I like to mention in this, to just, again, emphasize that this is very real, that it's been studied, that people who are actual scientists and in these fields understand these things. They just can't explain why, but they understand that they're true. And another one is this fire experiment. So what they did was they took a match, like a match struck, and so this match is burning, and they're bringing it towards someone's skin, and they're measuring at the same time their brain waves. And they've already measured what this person experiences when they see fire, think about fire, feel burning, right? They've already measured this. So they know where in the brain their brain is saying, danger, fire, you're touching fire, watch out. Right? You're seeing fire, be careful. You're hearing fire, be careful. So they understand where and how their brain is acting in all of those stimuli. Now they blindfold them, plug their ears up. There's no way for them. They're in like basically sensory deprivation of a kind. And they bring this match closer and closer and closer to the skin. And they can measure with many devices how much light is being emitted, where the light is going. They can measure how much heat is coming off of it and where it's going. So they can measure when the heat, has, let's just imagine like an aura around it of heat that you could feel or sense or perceive with some sort of device. When that aura comes close to the finger, so your finger shouldn't be able to know fire is coming towards it. Remember, you can't see, you can't hear. It shouldn't be able to know when fire is coming towards it until that heat aura is at least in contact with the skin, at least that, let alone the fire itself, the flame itself, right? And you can know what I mean. Like if you're going to go touch a stove, you can feel the heat way before you get to the actual object. It's the same with fire. So they're testing this, they're measuring this. And before the heat can even get to the skin, before the amount of time it would normally take for an impulse to run up your nerve and all the way up to your brain to register as ouch, heat, fire, watch out, the brain is already registering it and knowing the fire is coming, not even seeing it, not hearing it, just sensing it. This is also retrocausal. This means before it actually touches you, before the physical thing occurred, your consciousness knew it was happening or going to happen. This means it went back in time and told your brain, watch out, you're about to get burned. That's the only explanation. And so they have these experiments too, more and more, where they can show you register something as having happened before it happens. It might be microseconds of time, and it's still before, it's technically prior in our linear time dimension. So here's another example of retrocausality. You knew before it occurred, it happened before you perceived it. Very, very interesting. Consciousness knows in all dimensions and time, actually, what's happening. We could go through we're not doing a show just on the science behind this, though. So I'm just giving you a couple choice examples, but there are plenty of examples of dreams around the world registering a massive event before it occurs, of the random number generators that show that our consciousness is affected before major world events even happen. There's all kinds of stuff that show that time is not actually what's containing our consciousness, and that we understand things are happening or have happened or will happen before we consciously seem to know it. So here's one more scientific paper, and they're talking about consciousness. And they say, consciousness, which they also can refer to as free will in the science side of things. They say consciousness or free will is problematic because, one, brain mechanisms causing consciousness are unknown. So I talk about this a lot too. And again, you have to be somewhat versed in science to understand that scientists don't know what consciousness is. And it's one of my favorite things about science because, again, I'm a very spiritual person. Over the course of my life, I've been sort of forced into that, and I've understood and accepted it. But I started as a science person. And one of my favorite things is, like, we still don't know. We've done all this research. We've been here for thousands and thousands of years, and we still don't even know what consciousness is. We cannot even begin to explain it, which is, again, where science and spirituality are eventually going to have to merge. It exists. We know that. And yet we can't explain it. We have no mechanism for it. There's nothing in the brain that correlates to consciousness, meaning your brain can do lots of stuff and you can be not conscious of it, or you could be conscious and your brain cannot be correlating. Like, they're technically connected, but they are not one-to-one. So it's not your brain. They know that. And they know it's a problem, scientifically speaking. If you're a materialist scientist, this is a problem for you that you haven't explained this yet. You and I know that that's because they don't understand the soul. They don't understand spirituality. And so they're just not quite getting there yet, but they're going to someday. And also because measurable brain activity correlating with conscious perception apparently occurs too late for real-time conscious response. This is what we were just talking about too. It can happen too early or too late. And so it doesn't make sense to us. Like, you already made the choice, but then your brain shows it like later, right? So this is this exceptionally intricate series of studies that goes on to basically try to see, like, is there a way to even explain how consciousness works in the brain? Through the brain is a better way to say it, right? Like, it's a receiver, like it's a television or a radio, and it tunes into different aspects of your consciousness. It's a much better way to think about it. So it comes through your brain as just one of the things that can kind of translate some of your consciousness for you, not all of it, depending on what frequency you're tuned into. So there's all this problem with it. And they say here, they've figured out nanotubules that are entangled quantumly are part of the way this happens. To understand this, I'll just briefly say this is another version of time travel that we figured out materialist science, that when you entangle two things, you can move them any distance of space apart. And what you do to one thing, the other will register instantly without any time. There's no time. That is time travel because it did not need to take time to cover infinite space. So you can send information from one electron to another. You can make one electron spin a certain way and the other one will do the exact same thing at the exact same time, even across the entire planet from each other. That's entanglement. And entanglement proves time travel in theory and in actuality. And so they're saying that the brain, throughout your brain, you have entangled nanotubules. And that's how consciousness can seem to transcend time. That's wild. We know spiritually that this is true. Now they're starting to find even structures and mechanisms within the brain that can account for the time travel. This is fascinating. So you don't have to really understand all of that to understand that like science is trying so hard to explain why consciousness can travel in time and have actual effects on reality. That blows their mind. So here they are trying to explain it. And they say this can cause temporal non-locality, sending quantum information backward in classical time. That's retrocausality. And enabling conscious control of behavior. They don't really talk about perceiving the future and knowing the future, but if you can send information back in time, then clearly you could also do it the other way around. So super interesting paper here. And that is just one of the more recent studies on this topic. So we've established this is scientific fact. This is scientifically established. No one is debating whether or not it's true. They're just trying to figure out how it happens. Okay, so I'll tell you a story, an example in my life of retrocausality. I was at a shamanic event, and I wouldn't normally even go to this. This is another example in my life where I just was sort of pushed into this, not really against my will, but definitely not something I would have chosen to do. And so I was put into this. It was a drum journey is what they called it. And these are somewhat common if you are ever traveling in shamanic circles or you find people who are shamanic practitioners. Drum journeys are a pretty common thing to share with a more broader or public sort of audience. So, there's a handful of people there, still pretty intimate and small. And so the shaman was, lay back and starting to drum and guiding us through this. It's basically a guided meditation. And in it, you're supposed to essentially meet some of your guides and allies. This is actually one of the things I do now, which I never would have thought would have been true at the time. So, some part of me is like, this is kind of like, whatever, but I'll just do it. It's a nice meditation at least, right? No, it actually turned out to be one of the most powerful experiences of my life. So, proves me wrong over and over again that I, should believe and trust in these things more and more. But I went through this experience, and one of the first sort of stops we made along the way in the meditation was to meet a being, a guide or now a spiritual guide or ally, as I call them. And we were just supposed to sort of see them, maybe receive a gift from them, whatever. And I instead perceived this being to beckon me urgently, as though something were wrong. They were like, come on, hurry, quick. And I was like, oh no, what? They were like, quick, get in here. And they opened a tree, like the trunk of it just had a door, and they just opened it. And they're like, quick, get in. And I was like, oh, okay. And I ran in and the door shut, and I don't remember anything else. And at some point, I felt as though I was being called from just an infinite distance away. And I was very sluggish, and I was very confused about who I was or where I was or what was even going on. And I just felt something like tugging me out of like tar or like molasses, like just trying to like pull me out of it. And I was like, I just did not even understand. I was very out of it. And I barely kind of like managed to open my eyes. This is all happening on a spiritual plane. And I happened to sort of look up. I realized I was in a tree trunk, and I was looking up towards, like as if you were looking up through the trunk. And this giant eye came and looked down at me. And as soon as I made eye contact with it, it pulled me out of the tree and put me back on the path I had been on before I went in the tree. And I was running, and I was then hearing the shaman again saying, now you'll come to a clearing, and now this and this. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened? I was like, this must be normal. So I just kept going with it. It turned out afterwards, she pulled me aside and she was like, what was the darkness that came over you and what happened to you? Because I had to take care of everyone else and I couldn't stop, but like that wasn't supposed to happen. And it shouldn't have been able to get through my defenses, but this is sort of the story of my life. I have a lot of dark energies try to come attack me, and I have to free myself from them, it turns out. So it's good training along the way, which you may have understood by listening to my past series of episodes before this one on Gnostic TV. And so I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. You're the one running this. Like, what happened? She's like, well, how did you get free of it? And I was like, I don't know. All I know is I got called into this like tree and she's like, "Oh, never go inside of anything." And I was like, "Dude, if there are rules to this, you should have told me." Like, what do you mean don't go inside a thing? I went inside a thing because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. It seemed like you were in control of this and I was just doing whatever happened in the vision. She's like, "Oh no, never go inside of anyone or anything." And I was like, "Dude, I did." She's like, "How'd you get out?" I was like, "I don't know. Some eye came and looked at me and like pulled me out." She's like, "I don't know what that was, but thank God." I was like, "Thank God is right." Like, what would have happened if that didn't? She's like, "Oh, we would have figured it out." I was like, "This is kind of crazy." And this is again part of how I realized I had a calling to a higher path and how, this is how your soul sort of arranges things for you sometimes. So it worked out to my benefit and to many people's benefit. But I just had to kind of let that go and go like, I don't know, that was weird. Okay, moving on. A minimum of, I don't know, 4, 5 years later, a while, many years later, I was sitting at a campfire. I was with a group of people. I don't tend to use substances because I have plenty of visions and experiences enough, and a lot of substances will sort of push me into that realm, and I don't really need to be there that often. So I don't really even use marijuana anymore. I don't drink. I know there's a lot of things I've cut out of my life because I just would like to be clear and present. And, but other people do, and that's cool. Well, someone at this fire was smoking Salvia divinorum. I don't suggest it unless you're looking to have a profound spiritual experience. And if you are, I would do it in the proper setting with the proper people or person or space around you. I would just have the intention very clearly that you intend to communicate with your highest self or with all that's good, true, or beautiful. I would just take a lot of precautions to do it well and do it right. And if you ever need help or guidance around that, that's one of the things I do. You can, again, go to rogueways.org and book a coaching and talk session with me. And I'm happy to guide you through some of that type of stuff of how are the best ways to do these things. So, this person was using salvia in a higher intentioned way. And, it's pretty quick if you've never done it. I never have actually. It's one of the very few psychedelics I've never done, but it's a couple minutes at most, half a minute maybe. I mean, it's pretty quick, but in your experience of it, it can seem like years have gone by. So it's a pretty intense experience. And I really mean that. Some people live entire lives in great detail and then come back to this life and are so confused and so just disconnected and lost. And like, that's what I mean. You have to do this in a very intentional and present way if you want to do it well. And I'm sure legally I have to tell you just not to do it. So I'll just tell you, don't do it. So this person did this. And when they came out, which was again pretty quick, I just happened to be sitting in front of them and they looked right at me and they said, "You were there." And I said, "I was." And they said, "You were in the tree. Don't you remember?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "I looked down a tree trunk and I saw you at the bottom and you came out when I saw you. Do you remember?" And I was like, whoa. Because I've never told anybody really at that point this story. It didn't even seem important enough for me to tell anyone. If they had asked directly what happened to you in a drum journey, I would have told them. I wasn't hiding it, but it was not something anyone, and this person definitely did not know this about me. So that was amazing to me. This is retro causality. They, in that moment, went back in time to free me from that tree trap in that experience spiritually, which I don't know if I would have come out of otherwise. I was very deep. I was not aware of Lindsay or this life or anything when I was just nothing. And then that look, that is what pulled me out. This person saved my life as far as I'm concerned. And they did it by traveling in time 5 years earlier. And this is where it starts to not make sense to the logical brain, because you'd say, well, then how did you get out in order to meet this person, which I met after that point? I didn't know them at the point that I was stuck in the tree. So I met them after that point. How did you get out? How did you meet them? And how did they come to your house and do this at your fire if you hadn't already gotten out? And that's exactly it, right? That's retrocausality. That's how we can actually go back in time, do something, and it changes right here, right now. And sometimes it changes it so completely that just is then the linear narrative that we gave our life. Oh, I was always out of the tree. I was never stuck in the tree. I was always on this timeline where that is the outcome that occurred. Otherwise, I couldn't have gotten to the place where he smoked the salvia and went back in time and freed me from the tree, right? So there's a lot of things that seem like paradoxes and they seem like they can't be true, but it's just because our logical mind is stuck in this idea that time is linear and that we are this small being with this ego and this body. And that's not actually what we are. Our consciousness is infinite. It is not constrained by time or space. And it runs on our intention. So it was also then very clear to me that, this person and I were very close in soul and that we had a lot of love for each other. And that couldn't have happened otherwise. You can't just accidentally go sort of springing people from soul traps, right? So that was really profound for me. And that is retrocausality. And that is one example of how it can have very, very real effects in your life. And I will also then invite you to sort of practice this in this moment. This is going to be a very light practice, a very safe practice. My only rules are that if you're in a meditation or if you are in some sort of experience that is spiritual, that you don't connect with other entities or guides or allies unless you very specifically already deeply know them, understand how they feel and they look and they seem and trust them, then cool, right? But a lot of people don't have that experience. They don't know who their guides or allies are, and they don't know how to interact with or see if something's safe or not safe. So in general, the rule is just don't do it. Your friends, your guardian angels, your Buddhas, your saints, your higher level beings, they're not going to feel slighted by you. They're going to still be there supporting you from afar, basically. So you don't have to worry that you will not say hi or not run into the tree with them and that they'll hate you for it. So that's not a thing. So that's one of my rules. Just don't interact with beings if they happen to come through a meditation or something else and you happen to experience that, which again, most people are never going to. I shouldn't say never, but it's just not something that happens to everyone. And then that you go into any meditation or anything with the knowing that what you are connecting with is yourself, your highest self, your deepest self, right? And maybe God, if you have that conception, or source, if you call it that, or the universe, if you call it that, but that you know that what you really mean by that is all that is good, true, and beautiful, right? So you're very clear on your intentions of what you are, of what you connect with, of what you are doing. And so those are my rules, right? That's my expectations of people, that you're going to go into any practice knowing your heart, your soul, your highest self is what you're all about. It's what you're connecting with, and that you don't need to connect with anything else. And again, if you want to learn more about spiritual etiquette, safety, how to connect with other beings in a good, true, and beautiful way, in a way that is safe for you and for everyone else, then that is something I can teach and I guide people through. So you can go to rogueways.org. You can do a coaching and talk session, and we can do this. Anyone can do it well. You shouldn't do it unless you know how. So it's easy to learn. You just have to know what you're doing. But your intentions being clear, your heart being clear, and you knowing that what you're connecting to and doing is important in anything you do. So we're just going to do this sort of briefly. And in order to do this brief sort of guided meditation and experience, if you would like to join me right now, and you don't have to, you can do whatever you feel good about. But in order to do this, it is also important that you pick just a moment in your life. Don't go too hard on yourself at first. So pick like a sort of lighter wound, right? A fight or something bad that happened to you, or something that just left its stain, and you just kind of carry it still. You have some anger, you have some fear, you have some pain around it still. It can be a very specific moment, is what would be ideal and most effective in this moment. So maybe sometime again where someone was just rude to you or hurtful to you, or maybe something happened. The reason why I'm saying don't go too deep is because you can do that later, right? For this, we're just going to do this sort of quickly. So you don't want to go into something that's super traumatizing and then now I'm going to end the meditation and you're going to be like still in all of the pain. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Do that later when you have more time, for example. And this is the type of work I do with people. Again, this is what we do. And this example I'm going to give you is the lightest version of it. We go real deep. We go real hard, and we get into like the gooeyest stuff we can, because that's where we can do the most good for ourselves. So this is the work that I do in addition to other things. And so if you're interested in doing that type of work with me, then again, you know where to find me, rogueways.org. So again, if you want to join me, know that you're connecting with the highest good, the highest truth, the highest beauty, and that's it. Know that you don't need to interact with any other beings in order to do this work, that you're only working in and of yourself, and that you're safe doing that. So therefore, if you'd like to join me, you can do so right now. I would close my eyes, and I'm going to close my eyes. So as weird as that might look, you'll be closing your eyes too, so we won't know. And so close your eyes. Excuse me. And if you would like to, I also enjoy either putting my hands on my abdomen, putting my hands on my heart, or one on each, lower abdomen being right below your belly button. These are just some sacred places of power in your body. And for everything you ever do, what is great is to get in touch with your breath. And you can just breathe into your belly. And maybe you're laying down, maybe you're laying back, maybe you're sitting cross-legged, crisscross applesauce. Maybe you are sitting on a chair. Whatever you're doing, unless you're crisscross applesauce, just have your feet and legs uncrossed. So if you're sitting in a chair, your feet are just flat on the ground. If you're laying back, your feet are just uncrossed, comfortable. And you're just breathing into that lower abdomen. You can blow out through your mouth a few times just to sort of release any tension, any extra energy. And just remind yourself again, you are going into your own heart, your own consciousness, your own space. You're connecting with yourself. If you do have that spiritual understanding of source or God, you can just feel that in your heart or in your mind. You can just know that that's also carrying you or with you eternally. And you're just going to start to think or imagine or see in your spiritual eye or feel or know that you are separate from this body and you're about to move through time. So maybe you imagine yourself kind of rising up and out of your body. Maybe you imagine yourself standing right in front of yourself, looking at yourself, seeing your body standing there in that pose that you're leaving yourself in, safely protected, loved. And then just start to see yourself walking. Maybe you're walking backwards through a calendar. And we're in whatever month and year right now. You're just standing on that spot on a giant calendar. You're just going to walk back to last month, and the month before, and the month before. And you have a destination in mind, and it is the moment you chose before you began this process. It was a moment that still has some anger, some hurt, or some fear around it. Maybe you see that moment in the distance on this calendar. How many weeks, how many months, how many years away, you just see that sort of spread out between you and it. And you're just moving closer and closer. And if it's far, far back, you're going to go a little bit faster. And if it's pretty recent, you can just keep taking your steps towards it on the calendar. You're about halfway there. And deep breaths are coming into your belly, where you left your body. And you just keep coming back to this process of moving closer and closer. You're about 3/4 of the way there. You may see yourself getting younger as you go, until the moment where you're going to meet yourself in that moment. And you can probably feel then that fear, feel that hurt, or feel that suffering. And you're just going to tell yourself the truth. From you now to you then, you're going to say, you are safe. What's happening to you is not permanent. We can release this together. We don't have to hold on to it. We've already gotten through it. We are already safe. We are already loved. We have already released this. This is easier than you think. You are freer than you know. You can see yourself at that moment receiving this and feeling it. You can see your heart receiving that message and knowing that truth. You can see your energy field even becoming lighter or brighter. You can see you being more protected, more safe, more loved, more free. You can even see the event itself starting to fall away. Not as though it never happened, because it did, but as though it didn't matter as much as you thought it did. You can imagine yourself like an open channel where it just flows through and away from you. All of the emotion of it, all of the holding on to it is just released. Most importantly, the message is coming through and it's lodging in your mind and your heart way back then. How true it is, how loved you are, how safe you are, how successful you actually are, because you're already living it. This is the truth. And while you're here, tell yourself other good things about you. While you're here, tell yourself how strong you are. You are so strong for making it through this and much, much more. You're so beautiful. You're an eternal shining soul. How beautiful are you? Look how beautiful you are. Look at all the love in your heart. Look at how much love you have for yourself to have come all the way back here to this moment to heal yourself. You obviously love yourself so much. You can say, I love myself so much. Tell yourself how valuable you are, how successful you are, how cherished you are, how much abundance you have, how much freedom you have, and how it's only going to get better and better and better. And you might have actual tears coming out. You might have actual energy moving through your body in the future or the here and now, depending on how you're thinking of it. And that's okay. Just let it be. Let it release. Let it move. You might not, but you might be seeing it. You might be feeling it in other ways. And you're just going to give yourself one more big hug. From you now to you then. Just hug yourself. One more big dose of love, comfort, acceptance, trust, joy. And just say to yourself, thank you for letting this go. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for loving yourself. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love you, love you, love you. And then maybe you high five yourself. Maybe you shake hands with yourself. Maybe you just say, hey, I'll see you later. You're doing great. And then you can just begin to turn back around and look back at the distance you came. Look back at that calendar, those months and years spread out, and just start to walk back to your present. And you're about halfway there because it's easier on the way back. 3/4 there. And then you arrive back and you can look at your body and just lie back into it, sit back into it, move back into it. Breathe back into it, into your belly, into your abdomen. Feel your hands and your toes wherever they are. Move your body a little bit. And you're back. You can open your eyes when you're ready. And you might want to pause this or stop this and go journal or cry or whatever else might be going on for you. Or you might just understand that you want to do this again and go a little deeper because now you know the process and you might be able to immerse in it a little bit more. So it's not an unknown anymore. So, I just want to repeat this, go back and rewind it and play it again. And feel free to use this anytime you want. That was really fast. We did that really short because this is a show. But you can extend that, and you actually don't need me to do it. You know the steps now, you can just do it. You can just do it. And this is something actually I do a lot with a lot of my clients, either guided like that in a longer, sort of more extended way, or just as a practice I suggest that you do, because ideally you're going to do this until you don't have anything left to heal. Your whole past feels neutral to good to you. And that can happen. And I'll go back again to this point where I have CPTSD. This is complex post traumatic stress syndrome, which means much, much more than one trauma or type of trauma over the course of decades, compounded and compounded and compounded until getting just the surface of the trauma was a lot. But then to go to the next layer and the next layer and the next layer until I got to the root traumas, that was a long process. So if I can have complex post-traumatic stress disorder and heal from it using this and similar methods, then anyone can heal from anything, anywhere, anytime. So yes, you can, even if you're like, oh, there's a lot. Oh, I know. I've done it. And I am so much happier here and now. I am so much freer here and now. My personality is able to be bright and uplifted here and now because of the work I did going back in time. And I'll come back to, again, the psychological model. When I first was doing this, it was actually in a therapist's office, and it was via EMDR, which is a type of therapy we use for trauma release, for PTSD specifically. And it involves a very similar process, but they are not looking at it spiritually, and they are not looking at it as time travel. The way they're looking at it is you're going to recall the trauma, you're going to talk about it and describe what happened. And as you're doing that, these lights or an object is going left and right, and your eyes are following it. And by following it left and right, you're accessing both hemispheres. And by recalling what happened, you're pulling up all of the information your brain has stored around the trauma, and you're releasing any emotion that comes up. And then you are putting it back together in a linear narrative for yourself. So by the time you are done with just one traumatic event, by the time you've done this and let all the crying out and all the anger out and all the whatever out, you tell yourself almost exactly what we told ourselves here in this practice today, which is, but I'm here now and I'm safe now and everything is actually okay. And I am actually strong and I am actually protected and I'm happy and I'm safe and I'm okay. And that releases the trauma. So this is the actual therapy they use. Here you have it for free. I will again suggest you go slow and light on yourself until you're very, very well practiced in releasing whatever comes forth for you and in coming back to here and now and being integrated with it and understanding that it is all okay. So go with the lightest harms or sufferings or wounds. And when you feel really, 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 really good, maybe you go into some deeper, harsher sort of traumas if you have them. It is always safer to do it with a guide. It is safer to do it with someone, a therapist in an office doing actual EMDR if you do have PTSD or CPTSD. And I will also let you know the truth is anyone can heal anything at any time. So if someone can help you, great. If you need to do it alone, I guess you've got your guides and allies and they're going to be with you. So you're good. So this is pretty universal in some ways across materialist science, across psychology, across spiritual understandings of self and the world. And this retrocausality, we just went back in time and it actually affected us. And now here and now we are better for it. So this is just one example. It's just this one type of practice in which you apply that. And it is very, very effective and practical. And so I hope you use it. I want to also mention that we're going to be doing very deep and transformative work together at the Blazing Brightness Solstice Retreat, which is this summer, the solstice 2025. And I am hosting people in Crestone, Colorado. This is a much less known location of high spiritual significance. I've been all around the world. I've been to many sacred locations, and I've never been anywhere as powerful as this. It's in the middle of nowhere. You can fly into an airport that's an hour away, but more often people are flying into an airport that's 3 or 4 hours away. So it's a bit remote. And it is an exceptionally well valued retreat if you feel called to come do 4 days of intensive work with me and many others in this exceptionally powerful location at the summer solstice. Then you can go to rogueways.org and look at the retreat tab. And if you want to, you can also contact me from that site and you can ask me about whether or not it's a good fit for you or anything else you want to. So feel free to do that. And you are cordially invited to the Blazing Brightness Retreat Summer 2025. And finally, I'll leave you with a reminder that I'm here to support you if I can. I am a spiritual healer and teacher. It's what I do. It's what I've been called to do. It's what I love to do. There's no darkness too dark and no brightness too bright for us to work together. I do soul services and healing. You can find that again at rogueways.org. I also channel the spiritual ancestors, which is a group of ascended masters, and you can read their messages at rogueways.substack.com. You can do this at the paid supporter level, and then you get access to all of those channeled messages and the archive of them. Or you can also be a free subscriber there. And it's also a great way to get practices like we just did, health advice and support, and other free material too. So all of that is there at rogueways.substack.com. I hope 100% of you go right now and sign up for my Substack. I also do events all of the time. A lot of them are group events, and Lightning Oracle Tuesdays every first and third Tuesday are my cheapest and most accessible option, where you can come and get a channeled message from your spiritual guides and allies or your higher self. Answer a question, get a message, up to you. First and third Tuesday, every first and third Tuesday, and that's Lightning Oracle Tuesdays. So that is how we can stay connected. I'm always grateful to be here with you. Thank you for being here and being you. Thank you for healing all of yourself, because as all of the highest level sages and mystics have said over the years, in one way or another, when you heal yourself, you heal the world. So we can time travel, heal ourselves, and heal the world, and be on the highest timeline for ourselves and all of humanity. And that is what we're doing here. So until you know it, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first.
Glued to these screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rulers that don't like you. Prefer trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. Hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.